Hey mamas, and welcome to the Entering Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Marie Bilger, a wife, mom of two, VBAC mama, and doula. Join us every episode to learn from professionals, special guests, and moms just like you, ensuring that you know what you need to know and discover things that you didn't know before. I believe in you. Let's doula this, and let's navigate the transition of entering motherhood together. In this episode, we talk with Kristin, who is the founder of Gold Coast Doulas. Kristin shares her journey from advertising to birth work. She discusses her own pregnancy experiences and highlights the importance of building a supportive team for expectant mothers and people that are going through this stage and this journey. Our conversation covers the roles of doulas, budgeting for support services, setting boundaries with visitors, and prioritizing your mental health. She also encourages mothers to trust their instincts and seek information and personalized care that is suited for them and their unique situation. So obviously, I love this conversation. I love what we talked about, and this episode really offers some practical advice and resources for navigating pregnancy, childbirth, and that postpartum period with confidence and support. So with that, let's get this episode started. Hello, and welcome to Entering Motherhood. I am super excited to get this conversation started and have you here with us today. So how about we start off by you introducing yourself for the listeners?
Sure, Sarah. My name is Kristin Revere, and I'm the owner and founder of Gold Coast Doulas in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We are a birth and overnight postpartum doula agency. I have about 26 different subcontractors who work with me. Everything from sleep consultants, newborn care specialists, day and overnight postpartum doulas, lactation consultants, educators, and of course, birth doulas.
Very cool. And you also host a podcast as well.
I do. My podcast is Ask the Doulas. And I also have a book called Support is Your Guide to Birth and Baby and an online course called Becoming a Mother.
Cool. Very awesome. Well, let's kind of talk about how you really got into birth work and what that looked like, and then slowly trickle into like how that has expanded to all that you have accomplished and built today.
Okay, where to begin? So, my background is in advertising sales, a little bit of public relations, did nonprofit fundraising and political fundraising. I had kids later in life, so I was one of those advanced maternal age moms with my first pregnancy and have a stepdaughter who at the time that I met my husband was 7 and is now 22. So I had some experience in parenthood before becoming a mother, being a stepmom, but I was very focused on my career. And when I became pregnant, I assumed that it would be easy to assemble my dream team of experts. And many of my friends had kids earlier in life. And so their advice was a bit outdated. When I was asking for providers, some of their providers retired or, weren't a great option for me. So I hired an OB and was set to deliver at a particular hospital. And I didn't find that I really felt comfortable in my first appointment with her. And I don't really know what it was, but my gut is usually never wrong. And I wanted an unmedicated hospital birth and all of the things. And she just didn't seem like she was 100% supportive of my plan or thought that I could maybe accomplish my goals. So I then talked to more of my network, and one of my friends had delivered with a nurse midwife in the hospital and had multiple babies with that particular group. And so I made a call and they accepted me. So I switched care. And again, it was early enough in pregnancy that it wasn't, that difficult to do. So I had longer appointments and really connected with my nurse midwife. And told her about my goals, and she suggested I take a Lamaze class. And at the time, I didn't know about birth doulas. My daughter's 13, almost 14. And so I thought that the Lamaze class would be a good preparation for us and read all the books, watched all of the documentaries. I'm a planner by nature and I was in, the different mom board groups and was trying to learn all the things. So I knew enough to hire a Webster certified chiropractor and certainly took a breastfeeding class as my goal was to breastfeed. And so my pregnancy went along quite perfectly up until I developed preeclampsia at 37 weeks. I was on bed rest and didn't have symptoms. It was just basically, my blood pressure was slowly rising. And when they did my panel, there was protein in my urine. So I didn't have swelling or headaches or any obvious signs to me. So I was on modified bed rest and then was induced at 39 weeks. So a lot of my plans changed with, not being able to labor on my own at home and all of, avoiding interventions and so on. But to make a long story short, I had my membrane swept in my midwife's office at the induction day and then went into the hospital later that evening. And I had Cervidil, so a cervical ripener, and my body wasn't responding well to it. My daughter didn't, had some D cells. And so they ended up taking it out after a few hours. So, and I was having back labor. I remember, talking to my Lamaze instructor before going in. She gave me some advice on induction. And my husband had the manual and was, trying to do all of the things. And so, yeah, but luckily I didn't end up having many interventions other than the Cervidil and the membrane sweep. I did have, my daughter had D cells the entire time. And again, that back labor. So I remember having a birthing ball on the bed and a nurse ran in and helped position me and sway my hips. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I needed to poop on the table. And I asked my husband to check. And then they called in the nurse midwife and I was crowning. It all happened very quickly. And then all of a sudden I was pushing. So, but I do remember clearly during that short pushing phase that my midwife said because of the D cells, she had called in the surgical team. So I narrowly missed a cesarean birth. And my daughter was small, which is part of why the pushing was so quick and easy. She did have a cord wrapped around her arm, which is part of why there were D cells. But she was 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and had some glucose issues after I got to my postpartum room. So was then ended up in the NICU and was in the NICU for 4 days. So again, all of that preparation that I did for breastfeeding went out the window because I was pumping in my room and going back and forth from my postpartum room to the NICU. And our NICU was built that year. I was actually one of the first families to experience the
Wow.
new NICU, which has been great for me as a doula to have that personal experience. But it was a bit overwhelming. And so I ended up being able to, toward the end of my daughter, stay in the NICU to try to breastfeed. But I had 10 minutes to feed her and everything was very structured. So when I was able to bring her home because I did leave the hospital without my daughter. When I was able to bring her home, she didn't want to breastfeed. And the bottle was so much easier and what she was used to. And so I ended up utilizing both in-hospital lactation support as well as in-home, and was finally able to be successful with breastfeeding. So I ended up, my kids are 21 months apart, and my son was, a much different situation. I knew about doulas by that time. I was very involved in breastfeeding advocacy and brought some events to town that I helped coordinate. So I understood more about building my dream team. And with the second pregnancy, I wanted to avoid preeclampsia. And so worked with a functional medicine doctor, again, that Webster certified chiropractor, my doula, a naturopath, and wanted to make sure that because I was still breastfeeding, that I was not depleted in any minerals and nutrients. And so I really focused on my health. I swam and did prenatal yoga once again. And so I really felt like that second time around, although I was not yet a doula myself, I knew so much more and could certainly give my friends advice as they were expecting, and just assembled my own resources in my community because there wasn't a one-stop shop like Gold Coast Doulas has. And so I ended up becoming a childbirth educator right after my son was born, and taught classes about when he was about 4 months old. And then my students wanted me to become their doula. So I had no interest in doing doula work as a career at the time, but thought as a hobby I might take a student here or there if it worked in my family's schedule. And I attended my first birth and I fell in love with it. Like, it was my calling and passion. And so when I worked in politics, my passion was to have women feel comfortable running for office, confident raising money, winning. And it moved to having women feel empowered no matter how they birth their baby, feed their baby, what choices they make in parenting. And then with where we're at with the maternal health crisis, we have a childcare crisis. We've gone through formula shortages, like so many changes in the time, a pandemic, that I've been a doula, that I am still passionate about this work. And many doulas either get into the work because of an experience that is not so positive, or they had a wonderful experience and want to help people with that work, but they often get out of the work. The burnout range is about 3 years. So they get out of the work and move on. And I've been doing this work over 11 years and I don't see myself going anywhere.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always so interesting to hear, people's birth stories in general, but then to hear, like you said, like how you got into birth work, and there's always a different kind of story that each of us doulas have that really goes into it. But I love that you mentioned a chiropractor and a functional medicine doctor, and utilizing all of your different resources when preparing for your second birth, and then building upon those resources and having your childbirth education course. So what would you say is kind of the main message that you try to get across as far as building a team and situating yourself so you feel most empowered and confident to go into the birthing space?
I would say figure out what your goals are for your birth, and then utilize that in your existing support system. Like, if you know you have a lot of family support, your partner is going to be very supportive in that postnatal phase, then you may not need a day or overnight postpartum doula. You might be able to utilize, some meal delivery service, a housekeeper, some ways to fill in those gaps. And then as far as pregnancy and birth planning, it really depends on where you want to birth, who your provider is. Is there a big team? If you're delivering at home, does the midwife also have a doula and an assistant and an apprentice? Or is it one midwife where it might be beneficial to hire a birth doula? Or are some of the goals to labor at home as long as possible? and have a doula there and then follow you into the hospital. Or, if this is, say, a repeat surgical birth, you may not need doula support. So it just depends on unique goals. And again, one of my biggest goals, as I mentioned, was breastfeeding. So I made sure to have a team and ended up working with lactation consultants with both of my kids for two totally different reasons.
Yeah. When did you start seeking lactation support for your second?
Immediately after I got back from the hospital.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you recommend your clients to seek lactation support while they're still pregnant?
Not necessarily unless they have issues that could not be answered properly in a group or private childbirth class. Like, if they want
Uh-huh.
one-on-one time, they could have a consult. But for the most part, it's just knowing your options. And in my book, Supported Your Guide to Birth and Baby, I talk a lot about looking at what your insurance covers,
Mm.
seeing what might be covered by health savings or flex spending. For example, my insurance covered my chiropractor. And, my insurance also covered the in hospital lactation consultant, but not the in home. So that was looking at a bit of the budgeting priorities, the ease of having someone come to me and watch me breastfeed in my own setting versus being in the hospital and sitting in a chair and not having my own pillows and gear and so on. And so for me, it was a bit about looking at finances. And that's what I talk to my clients about. Like, what are your main priorities? Think of it as planning your wedding. If food is your big priority in the wedding, then, and if, say, reducing the need for potential interventions and having continuous support is your goal, then hiring a birth doula, because nurses are busy. Your provider may not be at your birth. It's helpful to have an expert who understands all the hospital policies and procedures and can support your partner as well. No matter if the birth is 2 days or 2 hours, it's still beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so true with how you mentioned budget because I think that's something that not a lot of people really think about at first. Like, maybe you're like, "Oh, I wanna have this, then I'm gonna have this," and, like, you, like, think about all these things, and then it's like, "Oh, wait, yeah, like, I should consider my budget and, like, what that looks like," but also going back to your priorities and saying, like, "If this is really important to me, like, what is that cost?" And I think it's really awesome that, more people at their baby showers and things like that now are, seeking funds for a doula or for lactation support or, for postpartum support. And it's really neat to see that that's, coming into play and people are voicing like, hey, this is a priority for me. Like, I'm not, too worried about the bath toys and the fancy stroller or something, but I want a doula and making that known to their friends and family so that they can help support them in that way and also realize like how important that is as part of their birth team.
Absolutely. And that is such a great point. Sites like BeHerVillage.com or even adding doulas and other services to the registry are so fantastic. And I love to see companies in my area have baby showers and the fellow colleagues then pitch in for birth doula support classes, postpartum doulas, and it is such a gift compared to, again, some things that may not ever get used, like certain bottles or onesies. There are many items that people register for that are not even needed until baby is crawling and more mobile. So they sit around your home
Mhm.
getting, just creating clutter and gathering dust, and you could be utilizing support.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think a lot of times, like, people think like, "Oh, I can't afford a doula," or, like, maybe that's not, really a necessity, but when you ask, like, friends and family and make it known, like, "Hey, this is really important to me," like, you'd be surprised at how willing they are with wanting to give you, postpartum support or having, like, a birth doula.
Absolutely, and many strollers are more expensive than doulas are, to
Yeah.
be honest.
They really are. We were, like, recently on a trip in Charleston, and my daughter, she's 5, but she just was like, "I'm exhausted, I don't wanna walk around anymore," and we only had one of those little umbrella strollers for our son, who's 2,
Sure.
and I was like, "Alright, well, like, let's take turns," and, like, things like that. I tried to, like, walk around to some of the shops around there just to find, like, a basic umbrella stroller, and we walked into this little baby store, and I said, "Do you guys have any strollers?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, this way." And they're like, "What are you looking for?" And I was like, "The cheapest option possible." And they were like, "Oh, okay, well, our cheapest one is probably around 400." And I like, my jaw dropped, and I was like, "That's your cheapest
Right.
stroller?" Like,
Yes.
I was like, "I don't even wanna know how expensive they get," but
There are
I
some
was
that
like,
are in
"Never
the
mind."
thousands. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, "Never mind, she can walk," and I ended up giving her, like, piggyback rides and walking, and we switched, like, in and out of the stroller, but, I mean, it's a very walkable city, and we weren't expecting her to get so tired so quickly.
Sure. Oh, what a story.
But, yeah, I mean, strollers can get expensive and all the different accessories and parts and the car seats and this and that, and it's like, yes, like, they're important, like, car seats are very important. But, like, considering just, like, the cost of everything and prioritizing your budget and figuring out, like, where that all fits in, and, like you said too, like, looking at your insurance and seeing, what is covered, like, you might be surprised, like, you might think, like, "Oh, like, I can't afford a chiropractor," and then you find out that it's completely covered, and so now, like, it's something that you should utilize, and you should, take advantage of even pelvic floor therapy. Sometimes it's covered with insurance or at least part of it. So, really trying to
Absolutely.
see all of those different options and really build upon that and see, what kind of benefits you can get and where that all falls.
Exactly. And many times, depending on the insurance, your provider would need to give a referral for, say, pelvic floor physical therapy. So if you have an HMO, for example, you would need that referral to have insurance pay for all or some of that. But I have clients looking at goals again. They might be an athlete. They want to be able to run a marathon in the future. They want to make sure that they don't have leakage. And so that's one of their goals is to get into a pelvic floor physical therapist, to get back to safely exercising, to get cleared by their provider. And again, so they're bringing that up at that 6-week visit. And that can be a long time. And you may have many questions before that appointment with your provider. So, a birth doula with that follow up visit, or certainly a postpartum doula who's in your home after delivery would be able to give you resources in your community, would be able to give recommendations, suggest you make some phone calls, say if you're needing a postpartum support group or you would like to see a therapist, for example. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another one too, like getting, therapy or even like I always say like get situated with a therapist before birth because you might not know like what's going to happen and if you already have somebody like a go-to established for any sort of postpartum anxiety or depression or any other postpartum mood and disorders and whatnot, like it's good to have that go-to person that already knows you and you're already established and you have that relationship with. And again, like insurance might cover that. So, really just being aware of like all of your options and all the different possibilities for your support team is huge.
right. And now so many employer benefits cover both birth doulas and postpartum doulas, like Carrot, Progeny, TRICARE for military, some Christian healthcare sharing programs. Maven is a newer benefit program. So you can also look into your benefits. I know I don't even understand like half of my husband's benefits. So looking into those in pregnancy as you're planning to see if there might be some coverage for services like therapists. Some, employer plans cover therapy and certainly other members of your dream team.
Yeah. Do you have any other, parts of a birth team that we haven't touched on or specified that is really one that you draw attention to for your clients?
So, certainly fitness. I mean, looking at moving your body, whether it's swimming like I did and getting a gym with a pool or, you know, doing prenatal yoga at home or taking group classes. There are so many different safe exercises that can be done in pregnancy, Pilates and bar classes, and with modifications, of course, and, walking and just, I think, movement, hydration, of course, nutrition. So if you're not seeing a functional medicine doctor or a nutritionist or dietitian, and there might be some concerns. So, like, obviously, preeclampsia and needing to get nutrients was a concern for me with my second. So I made sure that I had a team to help with that. But gestational diabetes is another example.
Yeah, I think that's so, like, important to point out. Like, it is, like I always say, like, the mental side is huge, but like the physical side and really just like overall preparing in as many different aspects as you can. And really, if you have, like you said, specific goals, if you have had a different birth experience and you want this one to be different, then, focusing on what aspects of your birth you can improve or really focus on to make that experience different.
Exactly. So, say a client had a breech baby with the first, really wanted a vaginal birth and has done some research, VBAC's vaginal birth after cesarean, and wants a team that is supportive of having a VBAC and wants a doula with not only experience, but maybe a VBAC certification, then finding that fit and support for something that, say, friends or family members might have fear or hesitation on some of your unique goals for your birth.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important to really, yeah, like, process those fears, and then, if you do have family members or friends that are kind of, I mean, like, that was my experience. I had a cesarean with my first and then, like, a VBAC with my second, and it was a lot of, "Well, you're at least gonna be in the hospital, right? And, like, is that safe?" And really kind of,
Right.
like, learning, the knowledge for myself, but then also being able to now, like, reiterate that and instill that confidence and empowerment in clients that are going through similar situations, and teaching them how to talk with friends and family about the safety of it and the actual logistics of it, and, between a repeat cesarean and a VBAC and what that looks like. So it's really awesome when you find people that are there to support you in the way that you are looking to be supported.
100%. And
Yeah.
having the partner support and family on board is so essential. So I always tell my clients and students in my courses and classes to make sure you have these conversations in pregnancy to get everyone on the same page. If your mother and mother-in-law want to be in, the room during labor, not just in the waiting room nearby, and you want a very intimate couple focused birth without all of the people coming and going, then you need to have those conversations before you go into labor. Then you don't have people trying to get into your room. I've
Mhm.
had that as a doula where I'm like, okay, you need to go back to the waiting room. They need privacy, and, even setting expectations of limiting visitors. Some personalities, the pleasing personalities, the helpers, they have a hard time setting boundaries, especially if they're exhausted. They're trying to feed their baby, rest when baby's resting, and then everyone's so excited and wants to meet baby. And then you feel like you need to entertain. So, talking to your partner, talking to your family about how to space some of those visits out and get the help you need at the same time where it's not you entertaining. Someone might unload your dishwasher for you or bring some food and help, not just hold the baby and bring a gift for the baby.
Yeah. Do you have any final piece of advice or words of wisdom that you would want to tell someone who's currently pregnant or in that very newly postpartum period?
Trust your instincts. So I would say no one knows your body or your baby the way you do. If something's off, say something to your provider, to your therapist, to your partner. So it's so important to speak up.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and, sharing your story and talking about birth options and all of our different options for birth and postpartum and different ways of support. But let us know like how we can get in contact with you, how we can reach you, everything like that.
Thanks, Sarah. So my business website is goldcoastdoulas.com, and I'm on social and Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest as Gold Coast Doulas. And then my online birth and baby prep course, Becoming a Mother, is thebecomingcourse.com. And then our book, Supported Your Guide to Birth and Baby, is available in ebook, so Kindle, and paperback, hardcover, and is on Audible and iTunes. And so you can find Supported in select bookstores, and that's supportedbook.com.
Very awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, mamas, so much for listening. Remember, you are a rock star. I believe in you. Let's doula this. Let's crank it up a notch and let's kick it into high gear together. Hit that subscribe button, share this episode with a friend, message me, email me, call me, beat me. You know how to reach me. We're doing this, mamas. I am so excited to catch you here next week. This is your one-stop go-to place for helping you find the resources you need to make the best choices for you and your family during pregnancy, birth, and most importantly, postpartum. See you later, mamas.